One morning, Taigen discovered the absence of a video on Osamu Sato. It appeared to be the act of obscure powers on the internet. Taigen decides to delve into the internet to find information about this elusive man. On the way, he finds many fascinating things, and many others left just out of reach. He sits down to make a video, and starts putting it all together. Your mind has been melted. You have breathed your last, but do not fear death. From now on, you will acquire 9 lives. Eventually, you will discover yourself for the first time. The first life's purpose: to dream. In the 2010s, word began to pick up about an obscure game for the PlayStation, LSD, Dream Emulator. The title immediately catches your eye for the obvious drug reference, but that makes it all the more peculiar. The PS1 certainly had games aimed for older audiences, but what could this possibly be? You're greeted with a flurry of psychedelic imagery and sound, and the game begins to tell you what the title really means. In life, the sensuous dream. In limbo, the silent dream. In lunacy, the savage dream. In laughter, the spiritual dream. In leisure, the sonorous dream. In linking, the sapient dream. LSD. The player is dropped into an apartment. Touching anything will transport you to another area, for instance, a town or a temple. Strange creatures might wander around. The textures may become warped in words and symbols. You'll wander around until a loud noise begins rumbling in your ear, and then LSD has no clear goal. It is simply a game about walking around various dreamscapes. Rumors and mysteries began to surround it. What does it mean? How does it work? Who made it? Some said it was a husband and wife duo. Others claimed the creator committed suicide. None of those are true. LSD was developed by Outside Directors, or OSD, the initials referencing the company's founder and lead creative, Osamu Sato. The second life's purpose: to learn about Osamu Sato. Born in 1964 in Kyoto, Osamu Sato belonged to a family of artists. His father and grandfather were photographers, his brother a ceramic artist. He describes his upbringing as being constantly surrounded by artwork. Quote, "My father was involved in the fine art or art scene in general, so most of his friends were artists, illustrators, sculptors. Naturally, they were often coming by our home. The everyday dishes we ate our meals with would actually be the work of an artist. We were just using them like normal, and I didn't find anything out of the ordinary about it. Thinking back on it now, I realize it probably all was a bit different from the norm. Art was just a normal part of life for Sato, and he inevitably became interested in making it himself. When he was 19 years old, he walked into a record store and was captivated by the cover of Kraftwerk's Man Machine. He bought it without a second thought, and their brand of snappy, synthetic dance music obliterated his tastes. 3 years later, he would release his first album, 1983's Objectless, a fitting title for a collection of mostly ambient synth tunes. Before this, he lacked the confidence to create music of his own until he began crawling record stores for more electronic artists, and the sheer variety and experimentation opened his eyes as to what could be considered art. After doing research into the cover of Man Machine, he learned that it belonged to a style called Russian constructivism. From here, during his university years, Sato became further enamored by artistic movements like Bauhaus, Russian avant-garde, and Dadaism. He happened to graduate in the most heated moment of Japan's infamous bubble economy, and turned his newfound passion for graphic design into a business. He would do commercial art for about 7 years before breaking away from the corporate world and striking out on his own. Under his company, OSD, he would debut his first art exhibit in 1991, Alphabetical Orgasm. The third life's purpose: to explore Sato's creative vision. In an interview from 1994 with Wired magazine, he explains, quote, "I am not able to determine if the images come from my brain or my computer. The computer is part of myself," unquote. This was part of a small marketing campaign for his book, The Art of Computer Design. Originally intended as an art book, he presented it as a tutorial to attract a wider audience. While it doesn't serve much in the way of actually teaching how to use software specifically to do what he does, it is still a bevy of information. Sato began making art when he saw what experimental creators were able to do with limited tools. In his book, he goes step by step using simple lines and shapes, flipping, inverting, and rotating them to create simple, vivid images. These grow in complexity, adding more steps to the creation process. He creates a smorgasbord of shapes freehand, then divides the pieces up to make a figure, or an alien, or a bug. It makes me want to try it out. Every time he talks about his creative process, he always describes this mix of problem-solving and experimentation. In various interviews, he's mentioned being introduced to the PlayStation and trying out a racing game. Because he had never played games before, he found himself crashing into walls and spinning out. He started to think about a game where crashing caused a change, but not an end. What if, in a racing game, smashing your car into a wall at full speed could transport you to another dimension? He considered the Eastern concept of reincarnation and moving on to another world after death, and tried to conceive of a setting where this would make sense. He landed on the idea of a dream. I wanted to make something where the player explores a world that keeps transforming like that. I wasn't sure how to put it all together so it sounded plausible, since nothing like that actually happens in real life. But it does in dreams, right? Like, maybe I was just in Shibuya, but if I were in a dream, I could suddenly be in New York, too. You can teleport all over the place, right? I wanted to do something like that. The fourth life's purpose: Eastern Mind. In 1994, the same year as The Art of Computer Design, OSD would release Sato's first game, Eastern Mind: The Souls of Tong No. Published on CD-ROM for Windows, Eastern Mind is a surreal point-and-click adventure rooted in the realm of Eastern philosophy. The protagonist is a person named Rin, who wakes up one day to find that their soul is missing. It has been stolen by the island of Tong No, and Rin journeys there to recover their soul. The first thing Rin must do is die. The game explains to you, do not fear death. From now on, you will acquire 9 lives. Eventually, you will discover yourself for the first time. You're given a selection of 2 eyes, 2 noses, and 2 mouths. By combining them, you will create one of 9 possible beings, each one with a different life and purpose. Every single one of these purposes must be completed before Rin can be reincarnated and take their soul back. The world of Tong No is dazzling and dreamlike. The titular island takes the form of Osamu Sato's head, and its various countries are journeyed to by going into his ears, cheeks, and the back of his head. The countries themselves are the lands of life, dreaming, time, and desire. The internal is external, and the multitude of creatures and concepts are all things which exist inside of the mind. Some of the playable characters' only purposes are to die. Others have more complex goals, like recovering 4 lost instruments. Some of the characters you can meet in other lives, like this guardian in the tunnel to the land of dreaming. In one of your lives, you discover that the 4 kings of the lands are conspiring to capture magatamas, beads common in Japanese culture, which here make up souls. The kings have repurposed them to power their various lands, but at the cost of destroying them. The end of the game sees Rin, now reincarnated, traveling up a mountain to find statues of the kings and trapping a cluster of magatamas, including the final one which will complete your soul. Rin destroys the net, reclaims the magatama, and restores his soul, in the process freeing the king of the mountain, Togyo. Togyo explains that Tong No was not supposed to steal souls, but purify them, and it's been corrupted by the other kings. With his return, the island can assume its original purpose. Eastern Mind has developed a cult following in recent years, bolstered by the popularity of Sato's later work, LSD. I find outsider art like this to be fascinating because it's an extreme double-edged sword. Sato himself has reiterated over the years that he isn't terribly interested in video games as a medium. It was simply the one he was drawn to for the projects he felt merited it. The same year, he released a video titled The Esoteric Retina, which is a remix album set to various clips of him performing in front of Dada-esque imagery. He was clearly multidisciplinary. When I say double-edged sword, I mean that these works can be outside the box and unique, free from the restrictions of common practices and standards. The other end of the sword is the realization that those standards exist for a reason, and it's easy to stumble your way into something nearly unplayable. Eastern Mind is more the former than the latter. I like it a lot, but it has some real problems with conveyance, namely in navigating around the world. I had to resort to a guide several times because simply trying to find where I was supposed to go was fruitless. Under that barrier, however, is a game that's really fascinating and full of interesting puzzles. Take for instance this one, where you need to register the names of these 4 nobles from the Forest of Life into a computer in the Land of Time. First you have to find them, then the computer, but the keyboard is in a fictional language. By using the eyeglasses, you can translate the symbols for a moment. That might sound simple, but there's so little that resembles real life that figuring even that out takes a lot of paying attention. The 5th life's purpose: to ponder intent. At first brush, you might expect Sato to be some sort of pretentious auteur type, but after sitting with his work for a while, there's a certain playfulness to it. The Esoteric Retina is clearly just him messing around in front of a green screen. He's throwing up every effect and funky visual he could think of because he's just sorta messing around. It feels like the goal was to make something fun and interesting rather than heady. Even the way he talks about Tong No carries that attitude. You'd expect a game with such abstract concepts and references to be some sort of too smart for you product, but no. Speaking to Red Bull Music Academy in 2017, he explained, quote, "Being an Easterner, making something Eastern would be most natural. If I tried to make something based off of Christianity, Christians would probably be like, what the hell is this? So I brought in some Buddhism. Like, for instance, game over is when the main character dies, right? In my game, the character is reborn as someone different, and the game continues. So in fact, if they don't die, the game can't progress, as in the Eastern concept of reincarnation. I built the whole world of the game so it was full of these Eastern concepts, these Eastern ways of thinking within someone's head." The 6th life's purpose: to learn. In between Eastern Mind and LSD, Sato produced a few other games, beginning with the sequel to his first, titled Chu Teng. This installment sees Rin return for another quest, this time to save the land of Chu Teng. The gameplay is a similar style of point-and-click puzzle solving, but it focuses much more on meeting a wide cast of characters who give you problems, items, and information. This one was nearly lost for a very long time, as it only saw a limited release in Japan. There is an English fan translation, though. This isn't my footage, as the details on how to run the game are sparse, and in some cases, deleted. Very odd. Rolypoly's no Nanakorobi Yaoki is supposedly an educational game. It contains 26 lessons related to letters of the alphabet. For instance, T for time, which sees the monkey character Bana failing to outrun the passage of time until he's a corpse that looks like it's out of a Five Nights at Freddy's game. The explanation for the lesson affirms the inevitable passage of the years. Or A for against. Here, the dog character, Pon, plays a carnival shooting game that's extremely difficult, but once the player finally lands their shot, the rat target pulls out a gun and shoots you back. The lesson? Try enough times and something will work. The characters are in his same surreal CG style, but trying to mimic real animals and not abstract entities. For instance, a crab or a cross-dressing peacock. Those colorful feathers are just things she puts on to dance at a club. As an adult, I find some of this stuff unsettling. The idea that Sato thought this would be a good game for children is pretty funny, if I'm being honest. The seventh life's purpose: to interrogate dreams. Of course, he is best known for LSD, and it's a game I would recommend to anyone interested in the medium as an art form. Just showing some clips of gameplay doesn't suffice. You really need to immerse yourself in it for an hour or two. It has no goal. It has very little in the way of characters, just these flashes of what could be people, but are really just representations. You wander and observe. You feel things. There's no real danger, nothing that's going to hurt you, but you stand in this world that's just a parking lot, endless stretches of cement and overpasses. There's cars parked here. People must have left them there. With someone else. I'm holding down an effeminate yet masculine human. She won't stop moving around even though I hold down both of her wrists. Maybe she is so powerful because her body has been possessed by some kind of monster. I tie her arms together, bring the rope around her back, and connect it to her bound ankles. She shouldn't be able to move now. Why I'm holding her down, I have no idea. Is it because it's a violent town? That's an excerpt from the dream journal that was used as inspiration for this game, written by an employee at OSD named Hiroko Nishikawa. I think one of the greatest successes of LSD is that it encourages the player to ponder its imagery as much as Nishikawa does what she sees in her dreams. I'm not Japanese and didn't grow up in Japan, so how do I relate to the mashed-up memory of a Japanese town? These bowl-like creatures walk through. Do I know them? Should I know them? The PlayStation was the perfect console for a game like this. The designers of the system prioritized speed over accuracy in its 3D rendering hardware, which resulted in its iconic wobbly geometry. I can't think of a better way to represent a dream than with these shapes that shift ever so slightly with each step. The world is watery and gestalt, made up of pieces sewn together by the mind. Of course, some of these could also be emulation issues. I'm not playing this on original hardware, but even if I was gung-ho about that kind of thing, I'd have to bankrupt myself just to get a physical copy of this game. It saw an extremely small release. There isn't a clear explanation for this, but my theory is the sheer size of the package. LSD didn't just come with a game, but a full remix soundtrack CD and a copy of the Dream Journal. Lovely, sweet dream. The book is extremely high effort, almost 200 pages long, full color, and packed with artwork and striking visual design. For a niche title by an experimental studio, I can't blame the publisher for only producing a small number of copies. The Eighth Life's Purpose. Draw meaning from nothing. After 2001, Osamu Sato took a long hiatus from public life. In a 2015 Vice interview, he reveals that he has been blissfully unaware of the international fascination with him and his work. He was so private that some thought he had died. Actually, if I was really dead, I wouldn't have any way of knowing about it, which makes it even more amusing to me, he replies. He explains that his absence from the games industry was the result of a changing market tide. He no longer feels that the games he made would be viable ventures with how niche they are. Whether or not he's right hasn't stopped him from continuing to work on personal projects in art and photography. As recently as 2022, he's released a new album, Roots, and held multiple art exhibits in Japan. It still captures his trademark style of digital effects and distortions. What strikes me most deeply about Sato's work isn't just that it's digital art. It's art that can only be digital. Where traditional art would have visible brush strokes and imperfections in pencil lines, his work is comprised primarily of these flat colors and smooth, computer-calculated gradients. There's a clean, almost rigid quality to it. It feels alien. At first glance, it looks chaotic, but many of his pieces are actually quite orderly. Things are arranged in lines and easily identifiable patterns. Many are symmetrical. It's just overwhelmingly noisy. A simple, blunt hammer to your senses. Wandering around the worlds of LSD is unsettling yet meditative. He creates friction between systematic and nonsensical, identifiable and unrelatable, like a dream of walking around your house, except this room is from your childhood home, and this room you've never seen before, but you know it's still your house. Sato himself has reiterated over the years that he isn't terribly interested in video games as a medium. It was simply the one he was drawn to for the projects he felt merited it. As I interpret it, Sato loves art, and he made games because they happened to be the medium that most suited what he was trying to do. If he wants to do something else, he'll find a mode that fits it. The Ninth Life's Purpose. Stay free. Osamu Sato's story is one of taking what you have and squeezing every last drop out of it. Songs from samples chopped up and blended. A man from a pattern mirrored and inverted. Games from the skills you've cobbled together. Magic from a computer. I'll close with an introduction written for the Art of Computer Design by Hiroshi Sano, an associate of Sato's and a professor at Tokyo Gakugei University. The computer is a magic box. Many graphic images are hidden inside it. There are geometric diagrams, letters of various shapes and sizes, countless symbols, complex and mutated forms, infinite colors, fantastic plants, beasts, and robots, all crammed into hidden corners of the box. By tapping on the keyboard or clicking the mouse, these forms can jump onto the screen, but in the hands of unimaginative or close-minded persons, they may not appear. According to Osamu Sato, there is a trick to calling forth these creatures, a trick he taught to me. Mr. Sato shows how to create these figures with basic shapes, i.e. lines, arcs, squares, and circles, and does so simply, clearly, and above all, very logically. This book is a beginner's introduction to the subject, an everyday guide to computer illustrating, a collection of design ideas, and a compendium of Mr. Sato's own computer artworks. All the shapes in this book are black and white, but it is a black and white world full of potential. Just looking at the myriad manifestations of form is a joy, but for those who will use it to begin creating their own shapes, this book offers far, far greater pleasures. Thank you to my patrons who keep this channel free.